It was nearly midnight when Helen finally turned off the small reading lamp beside her bed. The soft hum of the Vermont countryside buzzed outside her window. Crickets, wind in the trees, the occasional rustle of leaves. At 68, the silence no longer frightened her. It was her only true companion now. She had lived in this house alone since Edward passed away 7 years ago. He had built the bookshelf in the corner, the trellis outside wrapped in now wild roses, and even the small ceramic birdbath in the garden. Everything in this home carried his fingerprint, until slowly it began to carry hers. Helen had been a teacher for over 3 decades, raising 2 children, both of whom now lived on opposite ends of the country. The calls came less frequently each month. Birthdays, holidays, grandchild milestones. But what filled the days in between? Her own thoughts, her quiet regrets, her slow, unfolding rediscovery of self. The transformation had begun almost a year earlier on a rainy Tuesday morning. She had opened an old chest buried deep in the attic, untouched for nearly 2 decades. Inside, sketches from college, her own. Charcoal portraits, still-life fruit bowls. A self-portrait she barely remembered drawing. Seeing them now, aged and dusty, struck her like lightning. Who was the young woman who dared to draw herself so boldly, so freely? That afternoon, Helen cleared out the guest room and turned it into a studio. The paintbrush felt clumsy in her hand at first, her movements tentative, unsure. But the more she painted, the more she remembered that she had once been someone before she became a wife, a mother, a widow. There was texture in her silence. There was story in her solitude. Every evening, she would light a single candle, put on her wool cardigan, and sit before the canvas. She painted not to impress, not for approval, but because it was the only time she felt completely herself again. The neighbors began to notice subtle changes. Her garden was suddenly alive with color. Her window opened more often, music drifting through. She walked slower but with more presence. Even the woman at the post office commented on her scarves. Hand-dyed, Helen shyly admitted. And then came the night that changed everything. It was October, the leaves a wildfire of orange and red. She had been working on a painting of her late husband's hands, the hands that had built her life. She stepped back, squinted at the canvas, and for the first time in years, felt something crack open inside her. Not grief, not longing, but power. She hadn't known how deeply she had buried herself beneath years of duty, caregiving, and quiet desperation. That night, standing barefoot on the cool floor of her studio, she realized she had created life again. Not in the literal sense, but in color, movement, energy. On her own terms. Tears rolled down her cheeks, silent, soft, not from pain but awakening. From that moment on, Helen gave herself permission. She signed up for a local art exhibit, despite the anxiety that crept in every time she thought of strangers seeing her work. She joined a small creative collective at the library. She even started attending weekly coffee meetings with other women her age, most of whom were also quietly rediscovering the edges of their forgotten dreams. There were still nights when the house felt too big, when the ache of absence crept in like fog. But now she had tools to meet it. Brushes, paper, color. One afternoon, she received a letter from her daughter. "Mom, I didn't know you painted like this. When did this happen? I showed Emma your sketch of the garden, and she wants to come visit and learn from you." Helen smiled as she read the letter, folded it neatly, and placed it next to her tea. Something had changed, not just in her but around her. She was no longer invisible. Not to the world. Not to herself. She wasn't chasing youth or erasing time. She was honoring it. Each wrinkle, each ache, each long, lonely winter had led her here, to this vibrant, expressive second act. And all it had taken was one night.